What's going on, gamers? It's Phylactery from Beneath the Veil and welcome back to the channel. This week I wanted to go over the item Phylactery. So Phylactery currently costs 2,375 gold. It is made up of a point booster, a diadem, and a sage's mask, and it gives a total bonuses of 200 health, 200 mana, plus 7 to all attributes, and 0.7 mana regen. The most important part of this item is that it has the passive called Empower spell. So the next unit target spell you cast on an enemy deals a separate 150 bonus damage to the target and slows them by 50% for 1.5 seconds. This passive ability will proc every 6 seconds. So that's something really important to think about when considering heroes to purchase this item on, is you want to think about heroes who like some extra mana and health boost, as well as can make some use out of the 7 all attributes and then a small boost to their mana regen as well. So in saying that, we've gone through for your convenience, and if I swap over to my heroes tab here, you'll see that I've created a list of every single hero in the game that has some ability that will proc Phylactery. This is an exhaustive list, and a lot of these heroes will only have one ability that will proc it, most of them being their ultimate ability, so they're not really fit for purpose for Phylactery in general. But I just want to cover that there are 135 total abilities spread across 89 heroes that will proc Phylactery in some way. I've also made a little list here of some of the best heroes that we think. Some of these have been proven through the Berlin Major, some have been proven just through pubs that I've been playing. I've either been crushed by them or crushed with them. So I want to go over a few major highlights. So the two that most people are already familiar with are Bounty Hunter and Medusa. So Medusa can currently be played in almost any role, is exceptionally strong. And with a Phylactery, it will proc every time she casts Mystic Snake. So if you have a look here, her Mystic Snake is a 10-second cooldown, but I believe you can take a talent to reduce that as well. So you can take a talent at level 15, which will reduce that by 3 seconds. So that will take that down to a total of a 7-second cooldown, which is only 1 second longer than Phylactery's Empower ability. So every time you cast Mystic Snake, you will get a proc of Phylactery going off. Another important thing to consider is that every time the Cold-Blooded passive procs, when you get the shard, that will also proc Phylactery if it's available to be procced. So really, really strong burst. The other one is Bounty Hunter. So with Bounty Hunter, every time you cast Track, it will proc Phylactery if it's available, and then also he has Shuriken Toss to proc it as well. Both of these are on a 4-second cooldown and a 5-second cooldown, so most of the time when you cast either of these abilities, it's going to be proccing that Phylactery for you. So Phylactery can be a really good item to pick up on Bounty Hunter for early tempo. The other important thing that I should have mentioned at the top is that based on the cost of Phylactery, it is generally an item that you want to be picking up either as your first or second item. It's something that you want to be picking up early on in the game when the damage is the strongest. What it doesn't say in the spell description is that it's 150 magic damage, so that will be reduced by magic resist. So for most heroes, it's going to end out shaking out to be about 125 extra damage. There are some interesting heroes on here that I want to point out. I've neglected Lich from this list, who has been very popular as a hero to pick up Phylactery on. The reason for that is Lich is a hero that can get benefit out of Phylactery in combination with Frostblast. However, for the mana cost of the Frostblast, it's not really something that you want to be casting off of cooldown. It will also proc from Sinister Gaze, but that's a relatively long cooldown. And generally what Lich wants to be doing is dropping all of his spells in a fight, normally within 7 seconds. So you're typically in a team fight only going to be getting 1 or 2 procs, whereas there are other heroes who can make much more use out of this item and get much more procs off more consistently. Another hero who's been gaining popularity with this pickup is Zeus. So the reason for that is that Arc Lightning will proc Phylactery every time it's up. Arc Lightning on its own has a cooldown of 1.6 seconds, so cast multiple instances of Arc Lightning before Phylactery will proc. But Zeus is a hero that, because he's already got an innate escape ability out of Heavenly Jump, he doesn't mind spending that 2,300 gold on an item like Phylactery to significantly up his damage output, because he's already got that. He doesn't need a 4-star, for instance, to get him out of fights. He can just use Heavenly Jump to get in or get out. As well as, I believe, I didn't actually test it, but I think that with the new Lightning Hands shard, I think that will also proc. But yeah, really, really strong on Zeus. Other heroes that I've played personally that it feels really strong on is Lion. So with Lion, especially with Medusa being in meta, this is a bit of a niche case, but with Mana Drain, it turns Mana Drain into a damage ability. So when you max out Mana Drain, it's on a 6-second cooldown, so is the Empower ability. You can, for 10 mana, deal 125 damage after reductions. Even if you're not using it for the Mana Drain, you can simply just start the channel, deal the damage, and then stop the channel, because Phylactery does deal its damage before the effects of any other spells take place. So I found a lot of success with Lion. Phylactery will trigger on all abilities, so Hex will also deal damage before they're hexed. The Earth Spike, the first hero that you stun in the line, will get the Phylactery proc on them, and then Finger of Death will also deal an additional 125 damage on top of the damage that Finger of Death already does. But yeah, the main reason I picked it up on Lion is that the Mana Drain then turns into 125 damage nuke. It means that you get additional chip damage. So yeah, that's something to pick up. Oracle as well, with Purifying Flames being such a low cooldown ability, the amount of damage that you can output with Oracle is insane. I got absolutely slapped the other night against a party who was running an Oracle and Ogre Magi offlane. Oracle rushed a Phylactery and he was just outputting a ton of damage. He eventually ended up transitioning into that Ethereal Blade Dagon build that is pretty popular with Oracle players, and that Phylactery just helps up his tempo even more. It ups his kill threat before he would even be able to get those items. So yeah, super strong. Omniknight, I've been playing a lot of support Omniknight, transitioning into the core build with Echo Saber and going Shard. If you go Phylactery first, you can play around your Hammer of Purity anyway. Every time Empower is off cooldown, if you proc Hammer of Purity either from casting or from your auto attacks, it will add that additional 125 damage after reductions before dealing the pure damage of Hammer of Purity. So that has felt really strong. Bristleback, I've been playing some support Bristleback just as a meme, and Phylactery is incredibly strong as a tempo item. Viscous Nasal Goo will proc Phylactery 1.75 second cooldown, so every time Phylactery is off cooldown, you can very easily proc it again with Viscous Nasal Goo. If you also get the Shard, then Hairball will spit out and erupt at a location, dealing Viscous Nasal Goo and stacks of Quill Spray. One of the targets that gets affected with Viscous Nasal Goo will also get the Phylactery proc if it's off of cooldown. So yeah, Bristleback with a Phylactery can feel really strong, and it gives additional slows as well. With Ogre Magi, obviously very strong this patch in general. There is no real downsides to getting a Phylactery on Ogre, because you aren't getting any inherent intelligence buff except for the buff through all stats, which also buffs the strength, so you're not losing anything out there in terms of efficiencies. And then both Ignite and Fire Blast will proc the Phylactery active, as well as if you get the Aghanim Scepter to get Unrefined Fire Blast, that can also proc it. Plenty of ways to proc it with Ogre Magi. It feels really strong if you're playing Ogre in that support role. Even Core as well, probably. I haven't tried it. Other heroes, so Crystal Maiden, really strong this patch in general. Frostbite is generally the spell that you want to be maxing out first as Crystal Maiden these days, and Frostbite will also trigger Phylactery. As you can see, when you max out Frostbite, cooldown of Frostbite goes down to 6 seconds, times out perfectly with the Empower ability of Phylactery, so that's a nice way to step into tempo with Crystal Maiden and just keep accelerating your damage output in the early game, and then snowball that lead before, as supports, you inevitably start to drop off. Other interesting heroes, so Rubick is possibly one of the strongest ones that I think is being slept on a little bit. Every single one of his targeted abilities that he has on his own will proc Phylactery, so you can deal damage and a slow every time you spell steal, which when you're level 16 is on a 4-second cooldown. Fade Bolt, it will proc it. Telekinesis, it will proc it, as well as any of the other 135 abilities that will proc Phylactery. If you spell steal those, it will also proc those. That number isn't considering any neutral creep ability that you might steal from Doom, for example. So the bounds of damage that you can deal with Rubick with a Phylactery are truly endless. Other experimentations that I've had are in our universal heroes. So I think Bane is a big sleeper in terms of somebody that could benefit from Phylactery. So the other thing to consider with Phylactery is that it does provide a 1.5 second slow. That is something that Bane does not have in his kit at all. With the new rework on Enfeeble, it deals damage over time. It's pure damage, so that is something to consider, is that you might want to level Enfeeble first, and then play around your Enfeeble. If you've got Phylactery, it will allow you to deal a slow from range, which will then allow you to close the gap to get off your other abilities. And doing some testing with Bane, you do have the capacity to, if you do your combos correctly, you can deal anywhere between 1.6k to 2.4k damage on a single target with your combination of skills, because Bane is a hero that naturally likes to get the full duration out of all of his skills. So you'd cast Enfeeble to close the gap on somebody, then you would cast something like Fiend's Grip, or you might cast Nightmare and then start auto-attacking them before casting Fiend's Grip, and every single one of his abilities will proc Phylactery on whoever you cast it on, provided it's, off of the cooldown. So think about Nightmare, it's a 6.5 second duration sleep. The second you Nightmare them, it deals the damage of Empower first, and then puts them to sleep, which makes them invulnerable for a second. So you still get that damage going through. That's not something you have to worry about with Bane. Same thing with Fiend's Grip. The second you Fiend's Grip a target, they get that burst of 125 damage after the reduction from the Empower, and then you deal your damage over time. Bane is a hero that hasn't been super popular this patch, I think, because a lot of players just haven't been figuring out how to play him. I found a lot of value personally, and Phylactery definitely feels like an item that helps him snowball. Bane is a hero that naturally doesn't want to take big team fights, which I think is why he's struggling, because a lot of teams are just forcing team fights. But if you can play that pick-off game, if you've got the right lineup for it, then stepping into a Phylactery before other items like Liminal Forestaff can really enable Bane to get that potential solo pick-off threat on a target. Otherwise, if you're playing a gank that's 2-man against 2-man, can Nightmare one and, do your big combo to the other, and you'll still be dealing, 1,000 or so damage very, very easily in the early game. Dazzle is an interesting hero. So with Dazzle, because of the way that Bad Juju now works, if he's using all of his skills and then casting Bad Juju, it will actually refresh the single target of Phylactery faster, which means that you can be getting more charges out. Something that I haven't experimented with a whole bunch just because I haven't found the right games to play Dazzle, just with the people that I play with. But yeah, it's definitely something that does work. The cooldowns will get reduced, so you can deal a lot of damage if you're smart about your Juju placement, when you use it rather. But yeah, that's something to think about, is that with heroes like Dazzle and also with Tinker as well, who's not on this list, but it is something that you could potentially look to play around with Tinker, is that if you rearm, it will refresh Phylactery, so you could just endlessly spam lasers and it will deal an additional 125 damage. Something to think of if you want to play tempo with Tinker. And the last two I've put in here are two universal heroes, so Broodmother and Visage. Broodmother is a hero that has been absolutely dumpstered in 7.33, and with the hot fixes to her, still haven't felt super good. Phylactery is something that I've been experimenting with, and it feels kind of good, but Brood still feels pretty weak. But I think Phylactery might be one of her only real things that she can play around. With Spawn Spiderlings, it is a single target, so it will nuke the creep that you cast Spawn Spiderling on. Cast it on a hero, it will slow them down. With Silken Bowler as well, if you cast it on a single target, it will proc the Phylactery passive. There are a lot of heroes like Broodmother, same with Night Stalker and Queen of Pain, where they have an ability that is a single target that then can be somehow transferred into an AoE. So if you take the 20 talent for Broodmother, which makes 400 AoE on Silken Bowler, then it will start proccing the Phylactery. Same with Queen of Pain if she gets a Scepter. Night Stalker is also tied to a Scepter, where their abilities become AoE. They then start proccing the Phylactery. So that's something to consider, is that if you do step into the AoE Silken Bowler talent, Phylactery will only then proc on your ult. But it is something nice in the mid game. It will allow you to one-shot creeps to instantly spawn Spiderlings for the extra burst damage. But yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to go over with Phylactery. I hope that helped. Any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.